So this is my nephew's truck, not the truck that was actually in the picture, but you can see how our bead rolling worked out. This is a panel that has not been beaded yet. This is straight off the CNC router, the drag engraver. Just to give you a reference from how I figured out the highs and the lows and how to taper it and everything. So here we are at the CNC router, and I'm using a Widget Works diamond engraver. I got the little protector on it right now, but I'm using the Widget Works diamond engraver. And we used Adobe Illustrator to actually draw the image. So there's the freshly done one. And here's the bead roll one. You'll notice it has a little bit of distortion into it. And I'm going to explain what causes that distortion. So, bead rollers are very inefficient at stretch. They're not very efficient at stretch at all. And part of the reason why is because it's basically like air bending. So you have two dies, one's going up and one's going down, and the third point is you applying pressure to the outside of the panel. Okay, and that makes it's inefficient at stretch. It's not like a Pullmax where it's hammering and forcing the metal to stretch and come apart. It's just taking 2 points and pushing on the material, and then your hand pressure is the third axis, third input applying to it. But when we put a bead into a panel that doesn't run all the way through the panel, it's doing what's called gathering, and gathering is a change of form, not a change of shape. Stretching and shrinking are changes in shape. Gathering would be a type of change in form. And we could simulate that simply by taking and pinching the panel, pinching the piece of paper. You see what happened? that pinch is what's happening. It's just pulling material from both sides because it's not stretching, but it's changing the form, and that's that little pinch. So we could pre-stretch. We could pre-stretch right on the line, and that would allow us to, then it would have material, and our change of form would just put it where we wanted it. Or we could roll the bead and then shrink the little bits out of the ends, and that would put the panel back flat again. But how do we do that on something like this? How do I know how much to pre-stretch it in here versus this one? Because they all have slightly different pressures and slightly different die spacing. Or in here, how do I know to pre-stretch this right when I have this small movement, and this small movement all around it? So I don't pre-stretch art panels. That little bit I can hold down with just finger pressure. So how I mount this will take that distortion and you'll never notice it. But what I do as a bead roller, I take multiple passes and I slowly draw in my pressure, and that helps to mitigate it because we're inefficient at stretch, and by giving it more time under tension and drawing it out slowly, you can improve its stretch and make it more efficient. So we're going to go to the bead roller, and I'm going to get set up on the bead roller, and we'll get started. Probably going to start in the center of the panel like I did with this one, and I'll get that bed kind of sorted out, and then I'll come in, and we know the license plate sits in further than the outside of this bumper. So the next thing that I'll probably do is come in here and I'll fade in pressure, then run all the way around my bumper, and then fade it out at the last second. And that kind of creates an illusion that the license plate sits in deeper than everything else. This is a practice panel, so hopefully I do a little bit better on the other panel. But we'll go from there. But I'm going to kind of start in the center and work my way out. And once I have the tailgate in the bed, the bumper, the cab, the tires, then I'll come in and I'll do the axle, and then I'll start working on the inside of the bed. But I'm going to see if I can't get the camera set up, and we'll get rolling. So this is my beading machine. It's a Bailey, but it's been modified. I added an extra rheostat in order to limit the top end of the foot pedal. We changed the foot pedal out. Mine's not a TIG style. I would prefer a TIG style, but it is a rocker type foot pedal. The other modifications that we made is we added adjusters for the die spacing, and those were made by Coombs Prototype and Fabrication, and he does amazing machine work, and they're absolutely beautiful and they work great. We also I added a different handle. I like a little bit more leverage with the handle, so I believe I got that from McMaster Car, and I believe it was already keyed properly for those shafts. But I liked a little bit of extra leverage for my hand and the way that I move it. It just works better than the original crank handle it had onto it. The dies are Mittler Brothers that we're going to be using today. This will probably be the only set of dies that I use, and I just ordered a new set, so here's the part numbers and everything. I ordered mine from Summit Racing, or you can order them straight from Mittler Brothers. But they are really, really good dies. They're Nylotron and they're non-marring, and they work really well. So while we're here, the die spacing I have set up was for a little bit later in the project, so I need to close up this die spacing. So I'll be using my lower adjuster, and I'll be adjusting that in. And on the first pass, I'm probably going to be about one material thickness from die to die when it's lowered down next to each other. So here we are, and I've got, hard to see, I've got about a material thickness of die spacing in between the two. Okay. So that's going to be our initial setup, and we'll get beading. So my lower die is going to be my up, my upper die is going to be my down. And that's an important thing to keep in mind, is which die is doing which job. So I'm going to come in here, and I got my line for the edge of my bed, and I'm going to set the beginning of it on the back side of my bolt. I'm going to come down. Right about there I got some tension. I'm going to set my handle at about the 12 o'clock position from me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to move, and I'm going to wind in maybe a half a turn of pressure. Each machine is going to be different, so you got to kind of learn your machine. When I come to these turns, I'm going to slow down and creep through the turn. You want to hit the turns nice and accurate. Now I can speed up in the straights. This first pass I'm not really doing a lot, but I'm learning the muscle memory for how those turns are made. Now as I come to the end, as I start to go under, I'm going to fade the pressure out. So I did a little bit. I didn't do a whole lot. It's the face of the panel, but I've learned that muscle memory for how I want to move. So now when I go in, I'm going to set it the exact same way. But this time I'm going to turn in one turn of pressure. Same thing, fade out on in. Fade in and fade out. It's one of the most important lessons you can learn. That's going to keep our corners nice and tight. We can always come back in and work them tighter if we need to. Okay, so there we're touching. Now I'm going to do 1.5 turns of pressure. And again, we might not look like we're doing much, but we're just going to take our time and we're going to stretch it out of the material. Come in, fade out. Okay. Go back to the beginning. I have a little more pressure than I did before. I could feel it in the handle. So when I set my 12 o'clock, I set it a little bit different than the initial first pass, but it's fine. Fade out. We have a little bit of change now, but I've got that muscle memory down. So we'll make one more pass on that with this die spacing. Tighten everything up. Coming to the end of the line, fade out. There we go. We have a nice amount of lift now. So let's move on. Let's do the edge of this cab. Same thing. I'm going to kind of put the beginning of my line on the back side of this bolt. That's what Jamie Jordan recommends starting out. All right, we're lined up. Start my movement, wind in a little bit of pressure. Slow down for the turn. Now, if I get a little bit off, you don't want to kind of jerk the panel back to being correct. You're sometimes better off just to correct it slowly. See, we have a nice little bit of lift now, but I think I'll make one more pass. Give it a little bit more. So now our panel is developing a little bit of this because we're gathering a little bit. So I'm going to bend it over my knee just a little bit. Just try to help stretch it and get it in position. So we're going to come in on our bumper a little bit because our bumper, we've done this, and this sits in the mid-ground, the tailgate. So now we're going to do the bumper and sit on top of it. But what I'm going to have to do is between the edge of the tailgate, or the edge of the license plate and the edge of here, I got to fade in my pressure. So that's what we're going to do this time. We're going to count our turns. We're about 0 there. So there we go. That's a good start. Same thing. Now, once I get to this point, I got to slowly fade the pressure out till I'm at my start. So then we come back to here, same thing. Get set up, get on our 0. We're just going to wind in our pressure over time. And when I'm at that point right there where it's supposed to be the closest part to you, I want to have all my pressure turned in. That's going to give us that little bit of fade, which is going to give us the illusion that that sits further forward or further back than the other part. And we'll have to do more of that when we get into the tailgate. Here again, fade out. Come up, we'll make another pass. And again, fade it out. So So that's a good start. Got quite a bit of shape into it. We'll come in here and we'll get these tires. Sometimes you gotta step away from an area and get another area. And again, as we come to the end, fade out. So on this axle, I have the little square that drops down where the shock is. But what we're gonna do, we're gonna roll right through that and around just the axle because it has its own shape to it. We're just gonna let that little detail be in the scribe work just to be there. It's gonna look, it's gonna make the axle look more right the more rounder we keep it by just running through it. Once again, I'm trying to get that detail on the back side of that bolt. Wind in my pressure. Run right through where that shock is supposed to go. We're not going to worry about it. It's going to look better if we just run through it. A little bit of artistic license, like Bob Ross would say or something. Alright, so now we'll come back to that axle later. We're going to give it a little more shape just to kind of clean it up a little. Make it a little more round or something. Let's give the mirrors a little bit. I think this time, the last time I did it, I didn't do the mirrors, but I think it might improve it a little bit if we did it. So now this is an enclosed shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a line, and I'm going to have all of my pressure wound in before I cross that line. And then I'm not going to change the pressure till I'm after it. And then once I'm ready to be done, I'm going to wait till I'm beyond all of that before I wind my pressure out. And that'll get rid of my starts and stops. So let's start right here. Nice and slow till I get that muscle memory. So now I'm beyond where I wound in that first bit of pressure. So now I'm going to wind in another half a turn, again, while we're moving. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow in these enclosed shapes for us not to see our starts and stops. Let's wind in a little more. We're going to make 2 passes at that pressure, and then we'll see what it looks like. We don't want this lifted a lot because it's not a prominent detail. It's not in the foreground, basically. All right, so now that I'm beyond all that, we'll wind it out. You see it has just a little bit of lift, and I think that's where we're going to leave it. Let's go to the other one, same thing. Just a little bit of pop, just a little bit to raise it up. So we got most of that now. I'm going to add a little bit of die spacing, and we're going to come over the things that we've already done that we want to add die spacing to. So I'm just going to take and undo it a little bit, pull back my washer, see how much I've added. Right about in there. I'm basically doubling my material thickness now. So some of these details we want to be a little more prominent. We can come back around now and add some more die spacing to. And same thing, multiple passes. So this might sound a little counterintuitive, but die spacing can do more for lift than pressure because you have more room to stretch the material. And it's going to lift it up with a little bit softer radius. So we go through a couple of times and do that, then we could come back and tighten our die spacing back up and make the edges sharper if we wanted to. But I'm kind of liking that. I'm kind of liking the way that that looks right now. So we're going to move on to the bumper again. Because again, the bumper is a more prominent part. It sticks out a little bit more. Start in the same spot and wind in our pressure. Slow down for them turns. Once we get to this end, fade it out. You see now where we have 3 different layers of lift, and they're creating that look that we want. So I'm going to run the axle with this die spacing just a little bit, create a little bit more rounder effect on it. Doesn't look bad. Let's add a little more spacing. I'm going to run this little bit of spacing only on the tubes. Give the tubes a little more radius look. I'm going to fade it out. Just run around. Fade it back in. Doesn't look bad. Let's move to the inside of the bed details. So for these details, we'll start at the top. I got about 3/16. So I'm going to set my die spacing. It's already at 3/16, so we're good. Again, I got to remember my upside and my downside. So we're going to start back here. We're going to fade in because this tapers down into this. All right. We're just going to ride right through that tailgate latch. Once we're here, we're going to fade it out. Come back to the beginning. It's important we try to fade in and fade out in the same timing we did before. I got a little loose right there, so I'm gonna make another pass to tighten it up. Okay, I'm kind of liking that. So, our next die space is going to be a little bit heavier. It's going to be almost 1/4 inch. So let's make another adjustment. We're going to add about 1/16. A little looser. I think we're good there. Once again, remember my ups and my downs. What does the truck look like? So I'm just eyeballing and extending that line, and we're going to call it good. Once again, fading in our pressure. can see how we're kind of creating that tapered look towards the ends because of that fade, and how we have a nice even inset. So let's move on. We'll do this side, and it's close enough where I think we can use the same die spacing. Fade in. So important to learn your fade ins and fade outs. That was learned that by Jamie Jordan at the Mittler Brothers class on bead rolling. It's a very, very good class. There we are. There we are. You can see our fade in and our fade out. Looks good. This last one, I think we can do it the same die spacing. So here's the two panels, side by side. You can see the mirrors do look better popped. I think one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to hit this again. And I may bring this, at least the top half, up a little bit more. And we'll see how it looks then. So let's go back to the bead roller. We'll run this edge with tight die spacing one more time. And we're only going to bring it around to about here, and then we'll fade it out. And we'll fade it in and then fade it out here. And we'll add a little more die spacing to that. And then I'm thinking about maybe running and making this an actual bead, and maybe making that a bead, because the actual truck doesn't have a smooth bumper. That line is a detail that you would be able to see in shape. So let's head back to the bead roller and we'll just give it a shot, see what we can come up with. So here we are, we're back to, we set back up to tight die spacing, and we're gonna give it that little extra. I just think it needed a little more right here, something more. As we come around the turn, we're just going to fade it back out. So we can come around here, start anywhere in here really. But once we get to the turn, we're going to start fading in some of that additional die spacing. Then we get here, we're going to fade it back out. Let's do it one more time. Now between here and there, we'll fade it out. So here, I can start pretty much anywhere. But when I get up here, this is where I got to start fading it in. And then at this point, fade it out. That's giving me a more prominent top line to this bumper, which I think is going to look good. So now, the bumper had a little bit of a detail here, so let's come in and just give it a little bit. Here. See how it just gives it that little bit of pop. So let's do the same thing with this bottom line. I think it's going to make it look good. Got a little shaky towards that end, so let's do it one more time. Just gives it that little bit more of a line there, like the actual truck head. Let's see. Let's just tighten that up a little bit more. just adds that little extra touch to it. I'm going to run this line just one more time. I want to create a little more pop to get away from those mirrors some. I really think I'm happy with that. So let's go take a look and we'll compare now just those little details we added. As you can see, this panel laid much flatter. I bent it over my knee a little bit more, maybe took a little bit more time. But no pre-stretch, no nothing, just bead rolling. So we'll take it out to the truck and we'll actually look at it at the truck with the other panel. I am liking it. I think we're good to go. So here we are back at the truck. You can see how that little bit of detail just changed with that bumper and how the actual truck had a line similar to that. Now, we have a little bit of line here, but I don't think we're going to gain anything by trying to add that little bit of shape. I think we're better off just to leave it. But this is the finished truck with the little bit of mirror pop and the little detail to the bumpers, compared to if I had just left it alone like this truck with the much flatter bumper and the mirrors laid flat. So I like the other one better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I'm going to add those details to this one too. But I think that's a good stopping point. That's how we bead rolled the back of this truck panel.